G'day, Seb Webb here, and welcome to the Webb Performance Podcast. Each week, we will be diving into the ins and outs of athletic development from a strength and conditioning perspective, rehab perspective, and insights from current athletes themselves. This week, we are joined by Michael McBryde, proprietor of Elite Edge Fitness and customer success manager for Hawk & Dynamics for the Asia Pacific region. Today, we discuss the Hawk & Dynamics system, testing and improving athletic performance, and why the numbers matter. Awesome chat with Michael today, very insightful how Hawk & Dynamics operate and how he actually frameworks all the different types of testing. So let's just jump into the chat. All right, Michael, thank you heaps for jumping on. Really appreciate it.
Of course, man. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, give us a quick background of your coaching role and experiences within Elite Edge Fitness and also your role at Hawk & Dynamics.
So I guess my business started out almost 10 years ago as a PT, as many of us did. I sort of came out of school, spent a lot of time as a tradesperson over the years, and then dived into more of just your conventional fitness. And then I made friends with some really great, talented physios, and they sort of led me down the road of looking in sort of that more like global assessment, trying to look at people, understanding their functions and how they move. And then I sort of went and popped off and did a couple of little courses like the functional movement screens, we all know. A hot topic on that one, a little bit polarizing as to where people land on that side of the fence. But I think it's a good starting place on your journey to try and work out like how to implement some sort of standardized screening process. So you do actually have a process to go with. And then I moved on to capacity screen, which is more the performance space, and then dived into the SFMA, which is selective functional movement assessment. Then I sort of branched away from those systems and sort of wanted to dive into the rehab space a bit more. So ended up doing a diploma of remedial sport massage therapy, and then ASCA level 1 S&C, and then last year just went back for my first round of uni, very late in the piece, but ended up doing my postgrad for high performance sport at ACU. So sort of like a very long-winded round trip to do what everybody else did when they first went out the gate, which is actually go straight to uni. But I sort of found that was a nice way to lead me from sort of my conventional rehab, understanding the practical side of it. I'm a very practical mind person. I like to learn how the sausage gets made sort of thing first, and then start to develop into the understanding and the theory behind things a bit more. And then as things spike my interest, and I think that's sort of where it's led me a lot more into the rehab field initially, is coming from an action sport background for my own sporting purposes myself. So just seeing big injuries, a lot of acute rehab, and then being like hyper exposed to some really severe recovery processes. And that sort of set me up into the pathway where I'm more in the private sector. I spend a lot of time working with athletes who seek my advice specifically when rehab programs and performance programs maybe aren't quite specialized enough for their requirements. So then I spend a lot of time working with people who are either individually seeking me out or people who are at the upper end of their sports where they're focusing on those sort of 1%ers. It was that kind of work that actually led me into Hawken. I started working at a performance facility in Adelaide called Game Ready Performance. And I was fortunate enough to both meet and get along with the director of Hawken here for Asia Pacific. He saw the work that I was doing, and he saw us bouncing between a couple of different technologies at the time. And he sort of took me under his wing a little bit and showed me how the Hawken system worked. It really steered me away from just having to do my subjective assessments, from doing my FMS style things a little bit, which was supposed to be objective, but there are definitely subjective terms to it. Showed me the power of being able to use force technology in both force plates and dynamometry. And then from there, like my work that I was doing at the time ended up getting offered a job. And now I am technically customer success manager for Asia Pacific. But what that actually involves is I do all the education and onboarding for new customers. I do a lot of technical support. And yeah, I help people wherever I can.
Well, that's fantastic. That's a really cool story and a very interesting one as well. As you said, it's not as conventional as most strength and conditioning coaches like yourself, but gives you a lifetime of experience, especially with the functional movement stuff and tapping into that action stream sports demand or that market. And touching on that really quickly as well, what is it like actually working with people who are more action sports based versus your more conventional sports based teams, just quickly as well?
So the biggest takeaways I found, other than like the obvious imminent injury, you're always going to be nursing some sort of thing. Probably more so like the competition periods are so different. So like obviously everything that we learn about conventional, I mean, and I say everything is more so about like your team sport settings. Like there's a very clear season that's set out, and then you've got like weekly or bi-weekly games. They're normally higher frequency, and you're really just tracking and monitoring fatigue. I think the action sport space is kind of this beautiful luxury in how the format goes, because even in heavy loads, it's not that often you'll see back-to-back, like week-to-week competitions. So you almost end up rolling into like the peak of your preseason, or maybe like a small part of rehab if they've had a bit of an off or they've hurt themselves in one way or another. But more often than not, you end up rolling from what like you have a dedicated proper preseason like everybody else does, and you're chasing your strength gains and your speed and power. And then by the time you're peaking and you're hitting your competition period, they'll normally spend 1 week of downtime doing a little bit of recovery off the back of a race or, you know, whatever their competition is at the time. And then you're back into just like full load, like proper fun lifting. You're not worried about stress and volume, like, and they're pretty adaptable. If you wanted to introduce something because they saw something, or they're working with another rehab specialist somewhere else, or one of their friends wanted to try something stupid over the weekend, you can really dive in and push and branch them into some really interesting ways. Like it's not cookie cutter, you're not as stressed, and they really answer to themselves. So if they're determined to do something and they want to try something new, like you get the chance to experiment. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's very different to your conventional sports such as footy, netball, soccer, basketball, where, as you said, it's quite regimented. You know that there's going to be a specific duration of competition and like really specific parameters and how to train. That's very fascinating, and also probably a good takeaway for athletes out there, how they can actually start to see the bigger picture of this athletic development too. No, that's awesome. Let's dive into the Hawken Dynamics system. Just a brief overview of how the actual force plates and true strength and just the world of Hawken Dynamics actually operate. So athletic testing can be really functional and very engaging, and tells a big story too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I imagine most of us understand and talk about force technology these days, pretty hot topic across the board. So the Hawken system is realistically, it's just designed to make everything faster and easier. Those are, I try and just keep it as simple as I can when I'm talking about it. Like, what's the story you're trying to tell and why you're trying to tell it? And Hawken just sort of helps me do that. I was really fortunate to have a chance to play around with a bunch of technology before I actually personally landed on Hawken, before being offered a job with them. The system was designed, and then this is something that is like a little polarizing and has a bit of like a dual lens on it. It has to be good enough for the American system, and like they like to move hard and fast. So if your system's not accurate and it's not working well, and you need to get through a large volume of people, especially in like your college or your professional settings, it's not going to cut the mustard for what they need to do. Like, it needs to be simple, it needs to be usable, it has to be athlete friendly, the interface has to work quick and smooth, and then the reporting off the back end needs to be there. But on top of that, it has to have the highest validity. So it's like, if they're talking about 1%ers for multi-million-dollar athletes, you have to be like on the money, and you got to be able to back it. So Hawken can do a really great job of that. So our philosophy is keep it simple, stupid. But then if you really want to dive in and actually hit like some of the real in the weeds, in the depth sort of things, then our metrics and our reporting and our research scientists that we have full time allow us to go really, really over the top. If you want to like look at those proper like 0.1%ers and you want to extract at 1,000 hertz or 1,200 hertz sorts of things, then we can do that too. But I think the thing that really helped me and empower me as a coach when I moved to some sort of force technology was the fact that like the user interface is just super easy. And when you take away and you strip away all the complexities of like your sports science sort of stuff, it just makes the system so easy to use. So yeah, that's like our little snapshot on sort of, that's probably more my personal take on Hawken and how I feel about it. But yeah, it just helps me do my job more accurately and quickly.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic. And you're right. Even I use the system myself, and it's just so seamless. You can get live feedback immediately. Paints a really good picture for the athlete, and just the ability to get that really valid information so quickly, and it just helps the process so much. Like, you can give that immediate feedback, as I said, to your athlete, and you can make informed decisions on the spot, or as you can track track all the development over time as well, which is just fantastic. And touching on that a little bit, regarding testing and improving athletic performance for an athlete, why does the Hawkins system just outcompete most other systems because of this interface as well? Is there any more you can touch on what you just said before?
I mean, at the end of the day, if you know what you're doing and you're competent in using technology, the reality is if you have access to some sort of technology, you're probably going to be making better, more accurate decisions than people that are just flying blindly anyway. I think the coach's eye is an amazing thing to have behind you, but having some sort of formal management system, especially when you're talking about newtons and like, if you can measure velocity and you can measure force, like those are your two biggest factors for being able to work out where someone is on that strength scale. Like, are we slow and weak? Are we fast and strong? Like, where do we land in that sort of quadrant? I obviously, like, a tilted lens for me is that, like, I love Hawken and I believe in what they do. But at the end of the day, like, we're all competitors. And I think the awesome thing about all the competition we have across different force technologies is that we're all trying to help people do the right thing. I always think that the company that I work for is the best, hence the office and all the stuff I got in here. But I honestly think that if you're dedicated to it and you have a technology that seems to work well with your integrations, whether that's through like your athlete management systems, or you happen to be working with a team, or you've got a great relationship with someone like in a role like me, you have a really great tech support officer and someone who can just get you dialed in and really help you out. I think at the end of the day, like, if you're using some technology and it's giving you positive feedback, it's great. Probably the thing that we do quite differently though is our reporting systems. Our reporting systems are really dialed. They're really, really broad in that there's a lot of different types of templates that we can use. Everything from like quadrant reports, ratio reports. You can do group, team, block reporting, profiles with using a nice spider graph, like literally anything that you can think of. I'm sure at some point we have come across it. Like, our asymmetry report is elite. Like, it just makes, like, whatever the story it is you're trying to tell, we'll have something for it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And talking about numbers and testing, as you said before, the coach's eye is definitely probably the most powerful tool. But as we're going down this very technology-driven world, especially in the strength and conditioning, sports science fields, what's the purpose of having the numbers? And talking to an athlete here, because some athletes still believe in just the subjective results, where, as you know, most conventional team sports is a bit more objective because there's so many different position types, there's different roles, etc. But why do the numbers matter so much, and how can we actually just track athletic development over the long scheme instead of just the immediate term as well?
So I think a really good one that gets thrown around really regularly, and it's going into what you just said about having your positional data, is you can create your own normative data based on position. So it's great to know how you stack against your peers. It's not to say that all athletes need to be chasing some normative value though, because you obviously just have those unicorns who just, like, for whatever reason, they jump freakishly high, but their force production sucks, or they seem to be slow off the mark, but they're still just absolute elite movers. Or you have people who, I mean, we have worked on one, like both of us last year. He was someone who was is a stiff human, but he was moved like a bat out of hell. Like, he was genuinely just like a fast dude, but he was an amazing athlete. I think the main thing for us is, whoever you are in the sport and development side, whether you're someone who's coaching someone or an athlete yourself, and like I paint myself as a little bit of an athlete at times, if you're looking to understand where you have made, like, I think a jump height, right, is a perfect example. Like, it's the ultimate byproduct metric. Like, yes, my jump height went up, but let's look at like the 4 or 5 things that might have made that go up. We start to understand what it is. Like, are you stopping yourself faster? Are you accelerating better? Like, is your force production as an average better across the whole movement? Is your takeoff velocity now almost as fast as your peak velocity? Like, those are the things that we can now start to understand about someone's movement in space, and then how we program from that. And you just imagine, oh, okay, they're doing this better here, or maybe they're a little slower there. Now I can start to specifically break out, like, what do I need to do as a coach to help this person? But then ultimately, if we're needing to report to another group, so I need to be able to tell an HPM of a team why we have made these decisions, or, the investor might be a parent because you're working with a junior. People need to know in numbers, like just pure numbers, like this person is X percentage better one way or another. Because at the end of the day, like we as coaches are all reporting to someone, whether it's the athlete or the parent or the investor.
Well, that got me pretty excited, actually, just going through that again. Backtracking a little bit, for an athlete, as you said, we just take the vertical jump or the counter movement jump, for example. We have the absolute number being jump height, that's improved, but you said you might have your 4 to 5 different metrics of the real focus points of saying, okay, if we can improve these things, ultimately it should increase your jump height. Can you just briefly go over how, if we explain that to an athlete to paint a picture of their current results, saying if we can utilize these things, put these aspects into our program, ultimately it should improve this metric to help you perform better at your sport?
Yep. So, I mean, I'll talk in two terms because I'm sure that there's plenty of people that use a couple of different technologies here. So I just think about the storytelling that you just imagine someone doing a counter movement jump. They've got the hands on their hips and their first movement is that unweighting phase, or the eccentric phase, as some of the other guys call it. Then we're talking about like how well do you break or stop yourself? So how fast can you unweight yourself and how fast can you drop towards the ground? How much can you make yourself really stretch? How well can you hit the brakes and stop yourself? So we're looking at like how much rate of force development can you put back down through the ground and really like stop yourself from yielding so much to gravity? And then how well can you start to go through that propulsive, like really propel yourself up towards the sky, or your concentric phase as others guys. Those are the main three areas that I start to look. So I have a good lens as to how quick can we initiate the movement, how fast can you stop yourself, and what's sort of the average force that you can propel yourself with. So I'm just looking at my overall ability to create forces and how fast can I do it. And then obviously everything comes from a byproduct of that. Then you can start to look at, I guess, those main lenses. It's like, so for me, braking rate of force development is a really big one. Average propulsive force, so I can see over the entire propulsive phase from the bottom of the movement right up to when we start to hit towards takeoff. Like, what is your average force over that whole period? And then what are we talking about in terms of your peak velocity versus your takeoff velocity? And what is sort of the ratio between those two things? I find saying really helpful to start. What phase of the movement are we looking at? Like triple extension, do I need to be doing some of my more Olympic lifting work? Or is my my takeoff, my peak velocity really good? Or maybe I yield too much. So maybe my braking RFD is really low. So I can start to think about what sorts of movements are really help an athlete get through those areas a bit harder and a bit faster.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
cover most of the stuff you're thinking about.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And sometimes I believe, and I've done it myself just in my early days, getting so fascinated by the testing world and wanting to try and test everything, but keeping it simplistic and actually utilizing what's going to be most bang for buck. And if we tap onto why an athlete should understand how we make better decisions, just from a real broad scheme, no technical terms or anything like that, why should an athlete do consistent testing to actually ensure they are improving, even though there might be times where performance may decrease in a hard week of preseason or just a hard slog within their season? Why should athletes just continuously test no matter, especially with the force plate systems, because it's not too taxing on the body? Why should they be testing consistently to actually track performance or even regressions over time as well?
Yep. I mean, I guess it just depends how bought you are in the program. Like if you're someone who's there for a purpose and you really care about it, I think as a byproduct, you're going to want to test anyway. So if you're really serious about wanting to understand more about your body, it'd be the equivalent of like, say you get sick and then you keep on getting sick through the year and you're not quite sure why. And then you just keep on like vaguely going by. And then someone goes like, hey, what if you just do a quick checkup with me and I'll literally tell you why you keep on getting sick through the year? Like, why do you keep getting a cold? Is there some sort of habit or something that you can eat or something that you can just change in this tiny way? You come check in with me just once every now and again. And then if we start to move in the right direction and you stop getting so sick all the time, as like, you know, basic things like, should I be washing my hands more sort of thing. But it's like the same thing as like, you know, are we now able to take away, why am I plateauing in my strength, or why am I not feeling like my progression for speed is coming up? or I'm not sure why my right leg seems to be getting so sore after, X and Y. And it's like, okay, so now we're looking at some landing metrics, or maybe we're looking at like what your asymmetry is like between your left and right leg. But having those touch points as well, I mean, I see this a lot with my action sports crew is we'll be tracking really beautifully and everything's going all good, and then they have a little off, and then like it's not something that's notable to them, because if they haven't broken a bone, they're probably not going to tell me about it. So like they'll go have like what I would consider to be a significant and very painful crash, but then they'll come in on Monday and they'll be like, oh yeah, I feel all good. I'll get them to do a CMJ, and then all of a sudden it's like left force production is down by 47%. I'm like, oh shit, what have we done here? And then we get to have the conversation. So more than anything, like it's actually a really nice way to check in with your athlete, because then you get to ask them how their body's feeling. So the numbers are there to help us ask better questions and us be better at our jobs, because what you can't necessarily see the person doing, even with a good coach's eye, you might not realize that they're moving funny until their third set of back squats. And by then, like you've already loaded them pretty significantly, and maybe we've gone too far down like that loading path if they still want something quite acute. But we get them to do something like fairly unoffensive, like a bit of a jump, and they go, oh shit, that didn't feel too good when I landed on my left side. We go, okay, cool. So now let's start to look at it. Let's do a bit more Q&A. But it's saying that like a lot of athletes, because they've got high pain tolerances, like they might not tell you why they're in the hole or what they're feeling. They're just like, yeah, training's training, sport's sport. I know the footy players. I've been so exposed to footy players over the last couple of years, and like just hard units, like they take the biggest hits and they run their legs off. But unless they're getting knocked out on the floor, it's not a biggie. Like that's sort of the reality of it. But being able to track fatigue and look at some of those asymmetries just means that we can manage load better and have conversations and be much more informed about them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're so right. Like athletes, just with their pain tolerance, it's so high, and they're not going to probably tell you, especially with just action sports people. If they don't have 3 broken bones, they don't care. They're like, whatever, we'll just keep going on. Just to wrap up, just our discussion really quickly. Give me 3 tests that if you had to only complete these 3 tests for the rest of your life of walking, which is probably a bit extreme, but if you only have 3 tests that you can complete for an athlete going forward, what would they be? Just really out of curiosity for me.
For my crew specifically, I'll give you 2 lenses. So I'm going to give you a long-winded answer because it's what I'm best at. I'm always going to do a CMJ because it just gives me so much data on how they get up and how they control themselves. I'm probably going to do a plyometric push-up, so like a CMJ for the upper body, so I have like a good lens on how their upper body's moving. And then if I had to pick one pure force production, I would probably lean on the belt squat, like the ISO belt squat. Exact same positioning and everything as a mid-thigh pull, but just I find it's really good to be able to work out what their pure lower limb force production is. If I was more in like your footy space, I'd definitely be going a CMJ. I'd probably do a CMJ rebound because it's kind of like your drop jump, but you're getting something that's much more relative to that person. And I'd probably push a mid-thigh pull because that way you're getting like your whole body shot. Pre-season versus in-season though, like I'd probably, yeah, it's a hard one because I love mid-thigh pulls and I think they're invaluable because it's really good to be able to know what the whole system's doing under load. But yeah, it's a hard one. Yeah, definitely. I'd probably lean on mid-thigh pull, to be honest. If I could only pick 3 for forever for normal sport, it'd probably be CMJ rebound, and then your mid-thigh pull.
Awesome. They're the 3 tests I do, but I also try and sprinkle in just that squat jump just to make sure I can understand what the stretch shortening cycle is doing. But Michael, thank you so much for your time. I generally got a lot from that, and just even though we've been mates for a while now and actually been working together informally now, formally through the Hawk and Dynamics partnership with Webb Performance, I generally got a lot from that, and just the excitement I got from the brief overview of the purpose behind Hawken and just actually tapping into why the system was built. It's getting me really excited for the future. So thank you so much for your time, dude. Thank you.
Always. Love our catch-ups, love our talks. If this helps anybody else, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you heaps. Appreciate it.